Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that often sparks more questions than answers: occultism.
Yeah, and our guide for this exploration is a text called Sane Occultism.
Sane occultism. Okay.
What makes this source particularly interesting, I think, is its critical perspective. It critiques what it calls pseudo-occultism.
Right, the sensational stuff.
Exactly. It tries to steer us away from that and towards um, the foundational ideas. It stresses studying original works from, you know, mystics and Illuminati.
Makes sense.
And the central argument is really that at the heart of a cult, science isn't just like blind belief, but a shared experience.
An experience.
Yeah, an experience of consciousness that goes beyond our everyday awareness.
Okay, let's unpack this. So, if we're starting with this idea of a fundamental experience, what exactly does sane occultism propose as the bedrock here?
Well, the text points to this remarkable consensus, really, among those who've deeply explored these inner landscapes. Seers, mystics.
The experienced ones.
Right. They report experiencing states of consciousness that transcend our normal waking state.
Okay.
And these states allow them to perceive forms of existence typically hidden from our everyday senses.
Mm-hmm.
This shared experience, the source argues, is the very foundation upon which occult science is built. It's like a different kind of data point, you could say, gathered through expanded awareness.
That's a bold claim. How does the source grapple with the need for evidence? Because for many of us, proof lies in what we can see and touch, right?
Right.
And these kinds of experiences aren't exactly common.
That's precisely the challenge the source addresses. It points out that traditional evidential proof is difficult, really difficult.
How is that?
Because the faculties that enable these perceptions of what it calls supernormal faculties, they develop sporadically. It's not like everyone has them.
Okay.
So unlike natural science, which relies on the universal tools of our 5 physical senses.
Which we all share.
Exactly. Occult science taps into senses that are rarely cultivated or maybe even acknowledged by most people.
So if most people don't naturally possess these heightened senses, how are they supposed to evaluate any occult claims? Where do you even start?
That's a good question. The source suggests that the average person often have to rely on what you might call circumstantial evidence.
Circumstantial, like
patterns, maybe correspondences, perhaps even the consistency of reports from different individuals across time.
I see.
It actually draws a comparison to appreciating classical music.
Oh, interesting analogy.
Yeah. Just as understanding and enjoying complex musical forms might require some training, maybe a certain innate gift.
Mm-hmm.
The comprehension of occult science remains with a relative few who have, developed these inner senses.
This is where it gets really thought-provoking. The source also delves into how these extraordinary states of consciousness might relate to the origins of religious beliefs, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It observes a tendency for individuals who have these profound transpersonal experiences.
Experiences beyond the self.
Right. They tend to naturally formulate religious frameworks to explain them.
Makes sense. Trying to put words to the ineffable.
Exactly. They often feel a calling, maybe, to roles traditionally associated with the divine messengers or intermediaries.
Okay.
And this leads into the mention of mystery schools. The text describes these as institutions specifically designed to train and educate selected individuals for such roles and understandings.
Beyond these seemingly, out of the ordinary experiences, the text also hints that there might be more subtle influences at play in our daily lives, things we might not immediately recognize, something about natural phenomena.
Indeed. Sane occultism touches on the idea that rarer natural phenomena can exert subtle yet significant effects on our normal human lives.
How so?
Particularly in areas like health and disease. These influences might operate on levels or through mechanisms that conventional science hasn't quite grasped yet.
And there's a suggestion within the text that access to this deeper understanding has become more open in recent times. I think I remember the phrase opening of the mysteries.
That's right. The source proposes that in the 50 years or so leading up to its writing, there has been a gradual opening of the mysteries, implying an increasing accessibility to occult knowledge and experience. It's as if, a veil is thinning, maybe allowing more individuals to glimpse these deeper realities.
Now, the author of Sane Occultism shares their own personal journey into this world. It wasn't exactly a straightforward path of revelation, was it? Like, they didn't just buy in immediately.
Oh, not at all. The author recounts their initial exposure to occult science through what they perceived as rather superficial presentations.
Like what? Books, Lectures.
Yeah, books and lectures filled with colorful but ultimately unsubstantiated claims about astral travel and really simplistic views of the cosmos.
Right.
They use a pretty vivid phrase, putting their foot through it, to express their initial skepticism, basically rejecting these surface level accounts.
But this initial skepticism wasn't the end of the story. They decided to dig deeper, to go behind the scenes, so to speak. What did that deeper investigation reveal?
Well, employing their understanding of psychology, the author began to examine the motivations and methods behind these public presentations.
Okay.
They likened esoteric schools to dressing rooms, where individuals prepared for a performance,
Right.
and the underlying activities to potentially less glamorous back premises.
Huh. Okay.
However, this more critical look actually led to a significant insight, a growing appreciation for the symbolic nature of what was being presented.
So not taking it literally. This leads to a crucial distinction the source makes. The difference between understanding occult teachings as symbolic expressions versus taking them as literal descriptions. Can you explain that?
This is a really key point, yeah. Sane Occultism emphasizes that occult teachings often use symbols to convey abstract ideas.
Rather than being maps of actual places.
Exactly, rather than offering literal descriptions of concrete objects or events. A powerful example given is that of mystery initiations, where the initiate discovers an empty shrine and hears the whispered words, "There is no God."
Whoa. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, the text suggests this isn't necessarily a statement of atheism, but rather a pointer beyond literal interpretations, towards a more abstract understanding, what's sometimes referred to as the logos, the underlying principle of reality.
I see. It sounds like the occult doctrines function almost like a language of the unseen, a way for the mind to engage with concepts that go beyond our ordinary modes of thought. The source even draws an analogy to algebra, right?
Precisely. The text describes occult doctrines as a system of algebra that allows the mind to operate beyond the limitations of conventional thinking.
Okay.
It even goes on to suggest that those who cling to a literal belief in physical planes, rays, and hierarchies existing in time and space, well, they haven't yet grasped the deeper, more symbolic nature of these teachings. They're still stuck on the symbols themselves.
And the source stresses that occult science, as we currently understand it, primarily exists within the consciousness of its students, doesn't it?
Exactly. Cosmic law and occult doctrine, as we perceive them, are presented as human attempts, approximations, using symbols to grasp something that ultimately transcends our direct sensory experience, something inherently unthinkable in its totality.
But it's not purely an intellectual exercise, is it? There's a practical, experiential dimension to occultism as well. It's not just about thinking.
Absolutely not. Beyond the intellectual understanding, the practical application of occult principles is described as an art that can open a gateway to unseen realms through inner experience.
How?
Well, the source suggests that ancient rituals, for example, when approached with the right combination of knowledge, faith, courage, and reverence.
Not just idle curiosity.
Right. Definitely not casual curiosity.
Right.
They can still have a potent effect. They can still invoke powers, so to speak.
However, Sane Occultism argues that intellectual curiosity alone isn't enough to truly penetrate the depths of occultism. What else is essential?
The text emphasizes that going deeper requires not just intellectual engagement, but a fundamental shift in one's way of being. It involves devotion and a willingness to make sacrifices.
So it's a path, not just a subject.
Exactly. It's presented as more than just a subject to study. It's a spiritual path. And the primary motivation for exploring, say, astral experiences, the source asserts, should be a sincere desire for spiritual growth, ultimately leading towards what they term divine union.
The source doesn't shy away from acknowledging potential dangers, though, right? When engaging with occult science.
No, it definitely describes occult science as a potent force. It even notes that many who just dabble superficially are unknowingly protected by their own ineptitude.
Saved by incompetence.
Sort of. Because real success without the necessary inner purification and discipline could actually be profoundly destabilizing, even shattering.
Okay.
So this underscores the critical importance of approaching it with noble intentions and a serious commitment to personal development for, safe and meaningful exploration.
But when approached in the right way, what does Sane Occultism suggest is the ultimate purpose or value of occultism? Why bother?
Understood correctly, the source presents occultism as a gradual ascent. And as in from our ordinary sense-bound consciousness
Everyday reality
to the direct, intuitive knowing of spiritual truths. It's portrayed not as an end in itself, but as a means to various ends. It could potentially offer valuable insights for scientists or a sense of balance for those with mystical inclinations.
There's also this concept of a guardian at the gate of the mysteries, highlighting the need for a certain level of inner preparation.
Yes, the text evokes that powerful image of a guarded entry to these deeper realms. It emphasizes the necessity of inner purification before one can safely and effectively engage with more profound aspects of occultism.
Like a warning sign.
Exactly. It serves as a warning against premature or ill-prepared exploration. Don't rush in unprepared.
For those who do dedicate themselves to this path, though, the source suggests that the ideas they work with begin to have a tangible effect on their consciousness. It starts to feel real.
That's right. As students become genuinely engaged and committed, the unseen world they've been studying gradually enters their conscious awareness. These subtle aspects of reality begin to feel more substantial, more real to them.
And the key to truly unlocking deeper occult understanding isn't some secret handshake or password, is it? It's something far more fundamental.
Exactly. Not a secret phrase.
What is it then?
It's the seeker's genuine motivation. The source poses the essential question, what is it you want? And it argues that the answer, reflecting the individual's character rather than just their intellectual understanding, is the true key to progress. A sincere and aligned motivation opens the way forward. A self-serving one, well, it leads nowhere.
Illumination, then, leads to a connection with unseen power, and occult science itself is presented as neutral, right? Its worth is determined entirely by how it's applied.
Exactly. Sane Occultism stresses the inherent neutrality of occult science. It's a tool.
Like any tool.
Yeah. And like any tool, its impact depends entirely on the intentions and the level of discipline of the one who wields it. So clean intentions and a disciplined will are therefore absolutely essential.
So despite the inherent challenges and potential dangers, the source ultimately affirms that occultism, for those who delve into its deeper aspects with integrity, is a genuine path towards enlightenment.
Yes, it concludes that while it's certainly not an easy or risk-free path, it's even likened to walking a razor's edge.
Wow.
It is indeed a valid route towards greater understanding and light, but only for those who approach its deeper issues with the necessary strength and, crucially, purity of heart.
Okay. Now, shifting our focus slightly, Sane Occultism also spends quite a bit of time discussing how to critically evaluate occult claims. It emphasizes the pitfalls of both unthinking belief and outright rejection.
Yeah, this is a crucial aspect of approaching occultism in a sane way, as the title suggests. The source identifies two primary obstacles to genuine understanding.
Where are they?
First, the skeptical materialist who dismisses everything without even looking into it.
Right, the knee-jerk denial.
And second, the credulous occultist, a great word, who believes every claim without question.
The overly eager believer.
Exactly. Serious students are urged to find a balanced middle ground. Avoid blind faith, but also acknowledge that occult evidence might operate differently than purely scientific proof.
And when it comes to actually assessing specific psychic investigations, like clairvoyant readings or past life stuff, what kind of criteria does the source suggest we should use? How do you tell the good from the bad?
Well, the text argues we shouldn't just take claims at face value. It proposes methods for testing the validity of clairvoyant investigations, especially concerning things like auras, past lives, the Akashic records.
The big claims.
Right. The key is to look for corroboration and forms of validation that go beyond just the psychic's own assertion. You need some kind of check.
This involves an interesting balance, doesn't it? Between having faith during an occult experiment and then applying rigorous critical analysis afterwards.
Absolutely. It's a fine line. Sane Occultism actually recommends a degree of focused belief during occult experiments.
Why?
To minimize the influence of unconscious suggestion, because those employing supernormal faculties are apparently quite sensitive.
Okay.
However, immediately after the experiment, it stresses the importance of applying impartial, almost scientific-style scrutiny to the results obtained. Don't just accept it because it felt right.
The subconscious mind also plays a significant role here, doesn't it? As both a potential source of valuable info and, well, a source of misleading interpretations.
That's right, a double-edged sword. The source acknowledges that the subconscious mind, with its vast reservoir of forgotten memories and according to occult science experiences from the astral realm and past lives, can be a rich source of data. However, it also cautions against blindly accepting its contents.
Because it can be just noise.
Yeah, it can also contain unresolved issues, wishful thinking, purely imaginative material. You have to sift through it carefully.
So how does one navigate this complex inner landscape of intuition and subconscious content? The source mentions techniques like psychoanalysis and free association.
Yes, the text suggests that the subjective data gleaned from intuition can be analyzed using methods somewhat akin to psychoanalysis, like free association.
How does that help?
The idea is that by tracing the connections and associations that arise from an intuitive insight or vision, you can begin to discern its potential origins and validity. You try to separate genuine, maybe superconscious input from purely subconscious projections or noise.
Meditation is also presented not just as a spiritual practice, but as a potential hall of learning, right? Where occult doctrines can be accessed and understood.
Indeed. Sane Occultism proposes that the focused state of mind achieved through consistent meditation is actually a more likely source for many core occult doctrines than, say, dramatic, one-off miraculous events.
Interesting.
It emphasizes that spiritual work operates primarily on the plane of spirit and requires mental, and often physical, means to manifest on their respective planes. Meditation is a key mental tool.
And when different streams of knowledge, like modern research and ancient wisdom traditions, seem to converge on certain occult doctrines, that adds to their credibility, doesn't it? The example of root races is given, I think.
Exactly. That's seen as stronger evidence. The source highlights the fact that Dr. Steiner's account of root races, which apparently draws on geographical and psychological evidence, aligns with Madame Blavatsky's teachings derived from Eastern wisdom.
So different sources pointing to the same thing.
Right. This kind of corroboration between modern inquiry and ancient esoteric systems is presented as a stronger form of evidence within the realm of occult studies.
However, the source also points out that there can be a resistance to rigorous verification within some occult circles. People don't always want to check.
Yes, it observes a tendency in the occult world to sometimes shy away from thorough investigation, perhaps fearing that critical examination might undermine established beliefs or the authority of certain teachings.
The don't question it attitude.
Kind of. The attitude can sometimes be, you must accept this on faith or the whole structure collapses, which isn't very scientific, is it?
No. To address this, Sane Occultism proposes two independent standards for evaluating occult claims: the ancient, well-guarded systems preserved within initiation schools, and the insights offered by a deeper understanding of esoteric psychology.
Right. These provide both external and internal frameworks for critical assessment. You have the accumulated wisdom held within long-standing esoteric traditions.
The historical record, in a way.
Yeah. And alongside that, the understanding of the human psyche offered by esoteric psychology. These can serve as valuable touchstones for evaluating the validity of occult claims.
And the source strongly emphasizes the importance of following up subjective psychic research with experimental confirmation whenever possible. Don't just rely on the vision.
Absolutely. Purely subjective, intuitional insights alone are deemed insufficient. Psychic visions and teachings should ideally be followed by attempts at practical or experimental verification before being accepted as reliable knowledge.
Ultimately, Sane Occultism advocates for a grounded, rational approach to occultism, one that rejects both blind faith and the uncritical acceptance of authority.
That's really the core of its message. Faith and authority should carry no more weight in occult science than they do in natural science. Unproven teachings should be treated as hypotheses open to questioning, testing, refinement.
It's a call for intellectual rigor.
Very much so. The source even draws a parallel to the intellectual climate of the Dark Ages in natural science, suggesting that genuine progress in occult thought requires a similar breaking free from unquestioning adherence to authority, both seen and unseen.
Okay, moving on. The source then delves into specific occult arts, starting with astrology, but perhaps not in the way many people typically think of it, not just horoscopes in the newspaper.
Correct. Definitely not that. Sane Occultism doesn't present astrology as simply a tool for predicting the future.
Then what is it?
It's presented as a fundamental and necessary tool for the deeper practice of occultism. However, it stresses that a truly profound understanding requires a lifelong commitment to esoteric study.
So it's complex.
Very. It suggests that those lacking such depth would be wiser to consult a knowledgeable esoteric astrologer than to rely on a superficial grasp. Don't dabble without understanding.
It highlights the constant interaction between cosmic influences and our individual psychic makeup, emphasizing the need for esoterically interpreted horoscopes to truly understand these personal effects for those walking a spiritual path.
Precisely. Whether we're consciously aware of it or not, we're constantly responding to the energies of the zodiac and the planets.
Yeah.
Understanding how these forces specifically interact with our unique psychic constitution through natal and progressed horoscopes interpreted with esoteric knowledge is crucial for those seeking spiritual growth.
The source uses a compelling analogy, doesn't it, of a ship navigating the ocean to illustrate how enlightened individuals can work with, rather than be controlled by, these cosmic forces.
Yes, it's a great image. The unenlightened are likened to vessels tossed about by the waves, just reacting.
Right.
While the enlightened individual is like a skilled navigator who understands the currents and the winds, able to trim their sails and steer their course. They can even use seemingly challenging forces to their advantage for evolution.
And initiates actively engage with their karma and planetary influences, using their trained will, sometimes in conjunction with ritual practices, to bring balance to these cosmic forces within themselves. They're not just passive observers.
That's a key aspect of advanced esoteric practice described in the source. Initiates don't just passively accept their karmic destiny, they actively participate in its unfolding. They develop an understanding of how planetary energies are likely to affect their nature and consciously employ their disciplined will, potentially amplified through ritual magic, to achieve inner equilibrium. You can't change the macrocosm, the big forces, but you can modulate your individual reaction to them.
This leads to a discussion of ritual magic and talismans, presented not as superstitious practices, but as tools for focusing intention and aligning with specific cosmic energies.
Exactly. Ritual magic is presented as a means of strengthening the will by consciously linking it with corresponding cosmic forces. And talismans are described as objects intentionally created to act as focal points for particular types of energy, imbued with purpose.
Unfortunately, as the source points out, these potent occult arts have often been misunderstood and misused, leading to superstition and the often harmful practice of fortune telling.
Sadly, yes. That's the debased form. Branches like astrology and ritual magic have been degraded into tools for simple prediction and the perpetuation of unfounded beliefs. It's a far cry from their true purpose within occult science.
And the source views superstition how?
As a distorted echo of genuine but uncomprehended knowledge. Ignorance is tribute to something real it doesn't understand.
The source strongly condemns fortune telling, doesn't it? Emphasizing its negative impact on our judgment, self-confidence, and willpower.
It deplores what it sees as the damaging misuse of these arts, particularly fortune telling. It highlights its capacity to undermine our own inner strength and decision-making abilities.
What's the alternative, then, for divination?
True divination, the text suggests, should be guided by the divine principles associated with the specific operation being undertaken. It should be about understanding deeper forces, not just predicting events.
And relying on psychics and astrologers for constant reassurance is likened to a form of spiritual hypochondria. That sounds pretty harsh.
It is a powerful analogy. The source cautions against the unhealthy dependence on external sources for guidance, comparing it to the constant seeking of reassurance driven by anxiety. It argues this ultimately weakens one's spiritual resilience, leading to a kind of sickness of the soul.
The immense power of autosuggestion also necessitates caution when we engage with astrological information, right? What we believe can shape our reality.
Definitely. Given the significant influence of our own beliefs and expectations, the source warns that astrological information can be detrimental if we lack the understanding to use it constructively. Without proper knowledge, it can easily lead to negative self-fulfilling prophecies.
True divination, according to Sane Occultism, should be solely oriented towards spiritual development and undertaken with the guidance of an experienced initiator who can provide the necessary context and counterbalancing practices. It's not for casual use.
Absolutely. Divination should be a tool for spiritual growth, approached with reverence, inner purification, and under the guidance of someone who can illuminate its deeper spiritual and karmic significance and suggest ways to harmonize with any challenging influences revealed.
Okay, next, our deep dive examines the intriguing topic of past life records, how they might be accessed, and perhaps more importantly, how their validity can be assessed. How do we know if it's real?
The source explains that the record of every thought, feeling, and action is, in a sense, preserved. Preserved as an image in what it calls the reflecting ether.
The reflecting ether, like a cosmic memory bank.
Kind of. Think of it as a universal memory field. These images are linked together through association, much like our own subconscious memories are linked.
So, for those of us curious about our own past lives, how might we access this according to the source?
For personal exploration, the source suggests the patient practice of free association.
How did that work?
It involves diligently applying the technique of free association to any fragments of memory or intuitive impressions that surface. You let the subconscious gradually reconstruct potential past life experiences in detail. It takes time and patience.
When a psychic attempts to read the past records of another person, the process is somewhat different, isn't it? It often requires a shared point of connection in their own records.
Correct. The psychic needs to find a resonance, a point where their own memory trails intersect with that of the person they are reading for, to access that interconnected chain of past life images. Even a seemingly minor detail can serve as this initial link, apparently.
The source also cautions us about the intrusion of irrelevant subconscious materials,
Yes.
right? And the often fragmented nature of these past life records. It's not like watching a movie.
No, definitely not. Eliminating unrelated subconscious noise and distortions is a significant challenge. Records often emerge in a piecemeal and disjointed fashion, requiring careful interpretation.
So it's messy.
Often, yes. Interestingly, the source does suggest that communicators from inner planes might sometimes provide more synoptic overviews, offering valuable clues to guide further exploration. But that's presented as less common.
A key insight here is that only spirits with a sufficiently evolved consciousness, one that has moved beyond a primary identification with the material personality, can accurately recall and interpret past life experiences.
That's a crucial distinction the source makes. Only those who have attained a certain level of spiritual development, reaching what might be called the higher self, retain a clear memory of past lives.
So the average person, or even the average spirit after death,
Typically has no more reliable access to this information than the average living person. Accessing accurate records often requires working within the context of a school of initiation and potentially with the guidance of a more advanced being, a master perhaps.
So, what are some of the more reliable methods for cross-checking claims about past lives? If you get a reading, how do you test it?
The source suggests two primary approaches. First, obtaining independent readings from multiple psychics without them being aware of each other's findings. See if they align.
Okay.
And second, attempting to explain known aspects of the present life through the lens of the past life records. Looking for clear patterns of cause and effect, maybe even predictive elements based on past associations. To make sense of the now.
And there are certain warning signs that can make a past life record seem less credible. Like what?
Yes, red flags.
Right.
For instance, individuals claiming extraordinarily glamorous past lives, everyone was Cleopatra or Napoleon,
Right.
coupled with rather ordinary present-day achievements, or narratives that are overly dramatic and sensational like a soap opera.
So watch out for ego inflation.
Exactly. Records that seem to cater to vanity, with individuals claiming to have been highly significant figures in the past while demonstrating little spiritual advancement in their current life, or those filled with excessively dramatic details, are often suspect. They likely originate from the subconscious imagination, not genuine past life recall. The source gently questions this tendency for everyone to have supposedly been remarkable before.
The source also offers a critical perspective on the often cited idea of twin souls as a justification for infidelity within relationships, doesn't it?
It takes a skeptical view, of the frequent invocation of twin souls to rationalize extramarital affairs. It highlights the disconnect between this idealized romantic notion and the practical responsibilities and ethical commitments within society.
So karma might explain attraction, but not excuse bad behavior.
That's the gist. While karmic connections might explain certain attractions or temptations, the source argues that they don't necessarily justify acting upon them in a way that causes harm or breaks commitments.
Ultimately, the forgetting of past lives for the average person is presented as a merciful provision. Why is that?
Because a certain level of spiritual maturity is needed to handle such knowledge constructively. The source suggests that this natural amnesia serves a valuable purpose, protecting us until we have developed the wisdom to integrate past life information without simply repeating old mistakes or being overwhelmed by it.
Use the past, don't be ruled by it.
Exactly. The past should inform our present, not dictate a continuation of negative patterns.
Okay, shifting our attention now to numerology. Sane Occultism points out the wide variety of systems that exist, right? From simple letter substitutions to complex math.
Yes, it's a very diverse field. The forest doesn't attempt to provide a comprehensive analysis of every single system, but focuses more on the underlying esoteric principles that inform them.
And initiates, according to the text, have long valued number, color, sound, and form. Based on what?
Based on the Hermetic principle of correspondences, the idea that there are meaningful connections between the spiritual and material realms.
Yeah.
As above, so below. It suggests that the fundamental nature and spiritual affinities of an object or concept can be understood through these core aspects, and that numerical value can reveal hidden interrelationships.
However, the source cautions that a number in itself doesn't possess inherent power, does it? Where does the significance come from?
It argues the significance arises from the consciousness associated with it, and the train of thought it evokes in the mind. The power isn't inherent in the symbol itself, but in the consciousness that engages with it.
But power can be linked to it.
Yes, over time, power can be intentionally linked to an object or symbol through ritual or focused intent, forming the basis of a talisman, for example.
The manifested universe is described in terms of different planes of existence, each with its own unique characteristics and associations with specific planets and numerical values. Can you elaborate?
The source outlines a kind of hierarchical view of the cosmos. Each plane is characterized by specific types of fundamental particles, energetic forces, and forms of consciousness, and each is linked to a particular planet and carries a corresponding numerical significance in the grand scheme.
While understanding these numerical factors can be valuable for grasping interrelationships and the cyclical nature of things, its practical application to our individual destinies is somewhat limited. Why?
Due to the immense scale of cosmic time involved in many of these cycles. For practical purposes, its primary value lies in understanding the interconnectedness on subtler levels of reality. Calculating vast cosmic cycles has less direct relevance to the immediate unfolding of individual human lives.
The source also offers a critique of both Kabbalistic numerology, particularly gematria, and the numerology derived from the measurements of the Great Pyramid. What are the issues raised?
It expresses skepticism towards, for example, exoteric attempts to interpret sacred texts by reducing entire sentences to numerical values. It points out potential inaccuracies and variations in the texts themselves over time.
Okay.
Similarly, it questions the reliability of numerical calculations based on the measurements of the Great Pyramid, given the inherent challenges of accurately measuring such an ancient and eroded structure down to tiny fractions of an inch. The data itself is questionable.
Temples, the text suggests, are constructed as symbolic representations of the macrocosm, connecting rituals to the entirety of existence. Different traditions use different symbols.
Precisely. Temples are designed to embody the larger cosmos and the microcosm of the human soul, situating rituals within a broader universal context. Cruciform churches, circular sun temples, etc.
In the pyramidal form specifically.
It's seen as a symbol, a glyph of the universe and the human constitution, rather than a literal book of prophecy encoded in stone. It represents principles, not predictions.
Okay, turning to the topic of prophecy itself. Sane Occultism argues that true prophecy isn't a form of supernatural prevision, but relies on what?
It relies on natural and logical methods, albeit with access to additional data. Data from the inner planes, where events are believed to take form before their physical manifestation.
So it's like seeing the blueprint before the building?
That's a decent analogy, yeah. While it may appear to be supernatural foresight, true prophecy, according to this view, operates through natural reasoning, but with the advantage of insights into how events are gestating on the non-physical levels before they become manifest in the material world.
However, prophecy is also presented as being subject to modification, isn't it? It's not set in stone.
Exactly. It can be influenced by the collective consciousness, the group mind, and can be deflected or altered by things like mental resistance, prayer, and invocation. Multiple factors can change the course of events.
So precise predetermination is unlikely.
Very unlikely. It's more about discerning tendencies and probabilities than predicting fixed outcomes.
The source even suggests that an over-reliance on prophecy can have a negative effect.
How so? It argues that a preoccupation with a predetermined future can discourage individuals and even nations from taking proactive steps to address challenges. It can paralyze effort.
Is there historical evidence for that?
The source suggests that, historically, periods marked by a strong belief in soothsayers and prophecies have often coincided with national decline, whereas times of great achievement are typically characterized by a greater faith in human agency and initiative.
Interesting correlation. Ultimately, sane occultism encourages a scientific approach to understanding occult arts like prophecy, doesn't it?
Yes, viewing them not as supernatural interventions, but as relatively rare and often misunderstood natural phenomena. Phenomena that advancing psychology will eventually shed more light on.
So true prophecy reveals inclinations, not absolute futures.
That's the same perspective it advocates. Approach these arts with inquiry. Recognize them as part of the natural world whose workings we're still comprehending.
Moving into the realm of occult societies and groups, Sane Occultism places a strong emphasis on the critical importance of having the right motivations and associating with the right people. Why is that so crucial?
This is presented as a fundamental principle for safety and progress in occult work. Good intentions alone are simply not sufficient.
You need more than just wanting to do good.
Yes. The kind of people you surround yourself with and the underlying motivations within a group are crucial for navigating the potent energies of occultism without harm. The source even suggests solitary intuitive work is often safer than blindly following a poorly informed or ethically compromised leader.
Esoteric students often form groups, and the source describes the emergence of what it calls a group mind. What is that exactly?
It's described as a complex of shared ideas and emotions that can, in a way, transcend the individual minds of the members. It's built after individual development, unlike the sort of undifferentiated group soul of a race or species.
And this group mind is powerful.
Yes, it's depicted as a powerful entity that arises from the interaction of individual minds within a shared context of ideas and feelings. It's a kind of collective consciousness that can exert a significant influence on those within it.
And individuals within such a group share in its karma. What does that mean?
It means they can potentially inherit collective debts or responsibilities. Just as one might inherit family traits or obligations, members of a group share in its karmic consequences, positive and negative.
So it's hard to escape the group's influence.
Yes, unless an individual has attained a higher level of understanding and inner autonomy, it can be challenging to remain unaffected by the prevailing energies and viewpoints of the group mind. You get drawn in.
The subtle tone or atmosphere of a society can also have a gradual and maybe insidious effect on its members.
Definitely. It can potentially dull their discernment and draw them into less desirable currents. The prevailing attitudes and ethical standards within a group can have a subtle but cumulative impact, potentially eroding their ability to distinguish right from wrong over time.
Advanced occultists apparently recognize the danger of what the source calls tainted spheres within groups that have moral failings. What happens then?
The concept of a tainted sphere highlights the energetic consequences of ethical breaches within a group. Historically, the source claims serious moral lapses led to the dissolution and cleansing of esoteric orders to purify the astral environment and prevent further negative influence.
Wow, disbanding the whole group.
In serious cases, yes. And periods of purification were necessary before occult work could safely resume.
The source offers guidance on how to address scandal within esoteric societies. What's the recommended approach?
It emphasizes the need to isolate those involved for a period of purification, to clearly condemn the error itself while still showing compassion for the individual.
Hate the sin, love the sinner, kind of.
Something like that. And to allow the group's collective sense of horror at the wrongdoing to facilitate a cleansing without necessarily condemning the individual eternally. It's a balance between accountability and compassion.
Recurrent problems or scandals within a society are presented as a strong indication of a potentially tainted sphere, right? What's the solution then?
Persistent difficulties suggest a deep-seated problem, possibly requiring a more radical solution. Dissolving the group, scattering the members, allowing time for the energetic environment to clear, like letting a field lie fallow, and then potentially reforming with a fresh start under different conditions, maybe in a new place.
When confronted with spiritual negativity, especially from more advanced individuals involved in what might be termed black magic, what's the advice? Direct confrontation.
Generally discouraged, unless one possesses a significantly higher level of attainment themselves. The source advises a cautious approach.
So what should one do?
Instead of direct magical combat, it recommends invoking divine power and approaching the individual, if possible, with an intention of healing and redemption rather than confrontation.
This sacred name of Jesus is presented as a particularly potent force against impurity within the Western esoteric tradition. How does that work?
Within the Western esoteric tradition, yes. It's described as a powerful vibrational frequency that repels impurity, causing discomfort and a drawing back in those who are not aligned with its vibrations.
But using it effectively requires something specific.
Yes, it requires an inner alignment with what's called Christ consciousness, a state of elevated spiritual awareness and selfless love, and a genuine, compassionate desire for the wrongdoer's spiritual transformation, not just punishment.
While individuals shouldn't assume the role of ultimate judge, there may be times when one needs to act as an instrument of justice against harmful influences. What then?
The source acknowledges that there may be situations where one is called to act against harmful forces, but emphasizes that ultimate judgment rests with higher powers. In such instances, invoking the sacred name is suggested, with the belief that it will primarily harm the impurity itself, not the individual's core being.
Okay. Shifting now to the critical topic of authority and obedience within occultism. Sane Occultism issues some strong warnings here, doesn't it? About blind faith.
Very strong warnings. This is a critical principle emphasized by the source. It asserts that faith should not be demanded without a foundation of evidence and logical reasoning.
So show your work.
Exactly. Any teachings or practices should be accompanied by satisfactory explanations. The demand for blind faith, especially as a test of loyalty, is viewed with deep suspicion. It's a huge red flag.
Demanding blind obedience from a student is seen as a serious transgression. Why?
Because it's seen as a transgression against their own inner light or inherent wisdom. The source argues that no fallible human being has the right to demand such unconditional obedience from another. It invariably leads to negative consequences and abuse.
So how should a student evaluate a teacher then? What should they look for?
The source suggests evaluating a teacher based on the fruits of the Spirit, their character, their actions, the way they live their life. Do they embody the spiritual principles they teach?
Look at the results.
Right. Teachers who are erratic, uncontrolled, maybe surrounded by negativity or undesirable individuals, should be approached with caution. Common sense, the source argues repeatedly, is absolutely essential in navigating the occult world. Don't check your brain at the door.
Demands for obedience, especially when backed by open-ended oaths that don't include any way to withdraw, like loyalty oaths with no escape clause, should be viewed with extreme caution.
Extreme caution. The source likens it to signing a blank check. You're giving away your autonomy.
And if a school makes it difficult to leave, uses threats.
That's a massive warning sign. It indicates a potentially dangerous situation, a trap, from which one should seek to escape swiftly, perhaps even seeking higher spiritual protection. The source again mentions the name of Jesus, the sign of the cross, Holy Eucharist, as potential aids in the Western context.
Financial and political demands made by occult teachers are also presented as strong indicators that something is amiss. Why is money such a red flag?
The source suggests that true spiritual teaching, especially from the perspective of what it calls the Great White Lodge, should not come with a fixed price tag. Demanding money for occult secrets essentially condemns the teacher.
What about covering costs?
Reasonable costs for running a center might be acceptable as transparent, but charging fees for the teaching itself is frowned upon. Similarly, entanglement in political agendas is problematic.
Why is politics an issue?
It can cloud spiritual vision, lead to the misuse of esoteric knowledge and power, often driven by fanaticism or ambition. Esoteric societies deeply engaged in politics are unlikely to be doing true occult work, which requires a different focus. Aspirants are advised to steer clear of orders and teachers involved in politics to prevent being used rather than trained.
Moral integrity should never be compromised, right? Even for perceived good or knowledge gain.
Absolutely never. True initiators who follow what's called the right-hand path will never ask you to engage in unethical actions or associate with evil. If they do, they aren't on the right-hand path.
Our primary allegiance should be to divine principles, not to specific personalities or systems. What's the ultimate guide?
The source suggests that our own higher self is the ultimate guide and initiator. Personal loyalty to a teacher should always be secondary to selfless teaching, aimed at the student's growth and connection to their own inner source.
Teachers should see themselves as guides and advisors, respecting the autonomy of the student's consciousness and avoiding any form of mental domination.
Exactly. A healthy teacher-student relationship is one of support and guidance, honoring the student's individual journey and avoiding any attempt to control their thoughts or will. Teachers are means to an end, facilitating the pupil's connection with the master or their higher self.
And students need to learn from their own mistakes.
Yes, ultimately students will learn most effectively from their own experiences, including their mistakes. A good teacher allows space for that learning.
So when asked to pledge obedience, what should a seeker offer instead?
The source suggests they offer to obey their conscience, guided by the example of enlightened beings like Jesus, in the Western context, and to fearlessly follow the inner light they receive.
And if that's not good enough for the school,
then it's a clear sign that the school or teacher is not the right one for that individual. It indicates a demand for external authority over inner authority, which is considered problematic.
The source then explores the concept of secrecy within occult fraternities. Why has secrecy been so important historically?
It acknowledges its historical importance for safeguarding both profound knowledge and the safety of members. Occult itself means hidden, after all.
Protecting the knowledge and the people.
Right. Particularly in less evolved societies where such knowledge might be misused for political gain or simply lead to persecution. Even accepted adepts often avoided veneration as much as persecution. Oaths of secrecy were vital.
Messengers like H.P. Blavatsky are described as having a specific task related to secrecy, weren't they?
Yes, they were tasked with disseminating foundational occult principles to shift the general understanding of society, to prepare the ground, so to speak.
So they revealed something.
They revealed core ideas about the cosmos and philosophy, basic principles. But the practical methods of magic, the techniques for wielding power, were often still kept hidden, still guarded.
Occult science is presented as primarily dealing with the realm of the mind, correct?
Yes, the human mind, the mind of nature, even raw mental substance, which is theoretically manipulable through the trained human mind alone.
But tools help.
Yes, the use of specific occult tools and knowledge, carefully guarded by initiates or Illuminati, can significantly enhance this process. It's this knowledge conferring practical occult powers that remains protected, much like certain professional knowledge is guarded due to its immense potential for misuse.
The potency of occult knowledge, capable of both elevating consciousness and causing harm under the wrong conditions, is a key reason for this continued secrecy.
Exactly. It's presented as a measure deemed necessary until humanity achieves a greater level of spiritual maturity and ethical responsibility. The power is neutral, but its use depends on mode of regeneration or destruction. Secrecy aims to ensure responsible handling.
The guardians of the secret wisdom are described as being eager to share it, but face a challenge.
Yes, eager to share, but struggling to find suitable and trustworthy individuals to whom it can be safely entrusted. Finding worthy pupils is hard.
The Western esoteric tradition is also questioned about its provision for introductory teaching and public outreach, isn't it, compared to the East?
Yes, the source raises a point about whether the Western tradition has adequately provided accessible pathways for beginners, especially when compared to the more public-facing approach seen in the Eastern tradition through organizations like the Theosophical Society. Is there enough of an outer court?
Finally, our deep dive concludes by addressing the often misunderstood realm of Black occultism. It makes a distinction, right?
Yes, between those who deliberately embrace evil, aligning with destructive forces, and those who unintentionally stray onto what's known as the left-hand path, perhaps through ignorance or misguided ambition.
The deliberate ones are rarer.
Yes, thankfully rarer, but they represent clearer examples of spiritual negativity.
The use of drugs to induce altered states for psychic opening is strongly condemned.
Very strongly. Condemned as belonging squarely to the left-hand path. While drugs might offer temporary access, they don't confer genuine understanding or control and carry significant risks like addiction and dangerous astral contacts. Drug rigidity can even mask initial harm.
What about hypnosis?
Using hypnosis to force open psychic centers is also viewed as problematic. It might grant access, but not the inherent powers needed to navigate those planes safely. Plus, it depends on the subject's cooperation and can lead to undue influence by the hypnotist.
What's the best protection against Black occultism?
The source is clear. Resolutely avoid any engagement with it. Steer clear.
And trying to rescue those involved
requires extreme caution. It's likened to rescuing a drowning person. They might be unstable, suspicious, their character potentially deteriorated. It's a challenging task, needing level-headedness, patience, firmness, and knowledge of the terrain, so to speak.
The misuse of Kundalini, the serpent power or sex force, is mentioned as a key characteristic of Black occultism. How is it misused?
It's about perverting the natural flow of this vital energy, which is normally used physiologically or can be sublimated for spiritual purposes. Black occultism often involves degrading it for selfish psychic gain without relinquishing worldly pleasures or ego desires. It can essentially involve exploiting others' energy.
The source provides various examples of Black occultists and their methods.
Yes, including those promoting certain pagan practices while exploiting sexual energy disguised as healing, or groups manipulating emotions through false claims of past life connections and astral relationships, leading to broken homes and instability.
And selling knowledge.
Selling occult knowledge for money is repeatedly cited as a key indicator of being off the true spiritual path.
The source also briefly touches on homosexuality in relation to a specific group, associating what it terms unnatural vice with attempts at psychic development.
Yes, it mentions a specific instance involving homosexual practices within a particular group, drawing a connection between what it describes as unnatural vice and attempts at psychic development, noting negative psychological effects like nervous irritability, contrasting this with the health and serenity of true initiates.
Less common but more extreme forms involve cruelty and blood sacrifice.
Yes, intended to harness the astral energy released by strong emotions like fear and pain, and using the ectoplasm supposedly present in blood for materializations by lower-level entities. The source strongly cautions against such practices, deeming them dangerous and illegitimate for experimentation, certainly not for the average person.
Untrained psychics often experience problems, don't they? Extreme sensitivity leading to issues.
Yes, difficulties like suspicion, quarrelsomeness, fear of black magic, neurotic tendencies. This spontaneous psychism often stems from past life training or initiation, but lacks the control achieved through current discipline.
So occult discipline is key.
Exactly. It provides the necessary structure, training the subconscious time faculty, setting limits, and grounding through mundane activities like craft work, preventing the psychic from becoming unmoored.
Dietary considerations for psychics are also discussed. Vegetarianism.
The source notes that while vegetarianism can increase sensitivity, which might seem good, it can also lead to malnutrition or imbalances if not properly managed, especially for those unable to assimilate vegetable proteins well.
Is it required in the West?
It observes that Western occult systems generally do not mandate a vegetarian diet, unlike some Eastern paths. Adhering for humanitarian reasons is respected, but forcing it alongside occult training might require discontinuing the training if health suffers.
Occult discipline is compared to voice training for a singer.
Yes, it brings control, sustainability, and range. Untrained psychic ability, however beautiful initially, is often unsustainable and limited.
The hypersuggestibility of psychics makes them vulnerable.
Yes, prone to suspicion, reactivity, easily influenced by others' beliefs. This highlights the need for a supportive, discerning environment.
There's also a distinction made about types of psychic experience, auditory versus...
Reliance on auditory experiences, hearing voices, etc., is associated with the planes of form, the more concrete levels. Higher planes, the source argues, are accessed through pure idea and realization, a key philosophical point against overly anthropomorphic views of occultism.
Rapport, the energetic exchange between people, can be draining for psychics.
Yes, it's likened to a blood transfusion. Psychics, with their extended auras, easily establish rapport, which can lead to leaking vitality and ill health, if not managed consciously. Treatment involves severing unwanted connections and healing the aura, often through emotional quiet and nature.
And applying mental influence or treatment to others without consent.
Deemed a violation of their freedom and soul integrity, even with good intentions. Consent should always be obtained, and the potential disruption to the other person's own spiritual path considered. Rapport continues after treatment, requiring proper shutdown.
Because we don't really know what another soul needs.
Exactly. The source states no individual possesses sufficient wisdom to fully understand another's evolutionary stage, karmic debts, and overall position. Don't presume to know best.
Advanced occult teachers have held differing views on vegetarianism, haven't they?
Yes, some advocated it, others didn't see it as essential for raising consciousness. No single rule.
And imposing strict dietary rules alongside intensive occult training can sometimes be detrimental.
Especially for those with strenuous jobs or limited access to proper substitutes. Making vegetarianism a fetish, an absolute non-negotiable tenet, is challenged by the source, as many great initiates were apparently meat eaters. Its results are often negative from both occult and health perspectives when forced inappropriately.
The source emphasizes that the East is not the only home of occultism.
Absolutely. Every race and culture has its own guarded wisdom. The Western tradition has roots in Egypt, Chaldea, Greece, Norse cultures, and elsewhere.
And different traditions emphasize different things.
Yes, based on racial temperament and what the source calls dharma, duty, or inherent nature task. Western occultism tends to focus more on the powers of the mind, while the East has often excelled in metaphysics. Practical application, especially training and initiation, should ideally follow one's own racial or cultural evolutionary path.
So Eastern methods might not work well for Westerners.
Often they don't succeed fully for Europeans in Europe, for example, due to differing conditions, ingrained temperaments, and even racial tasks. The source gives the example of the Hindu higher mind discipline, potentially hindering the development of the Anglo-Saxon concrete mind, which was seen as their specific task. At one point, operating one requires suppressing the other.
There are even physiological differences mentioned. Endocrine balance.
Yes, Western science, endocrinology, is seen as confirming the East's understanding of the mind-body link via gland chakras. However, the balance of these systems varies significantly between races, contributing to different racial types and affecting responses to initiatory methods like susceptibility to shock.
But Westerners have strengths too.
Remarkable stamina, endurance, bodily control shaped by modern life. Eastern adepts also have mastery. The point is, rightly applied occult discipline, suited to the Constitution, should not cause ill health. If it does, something's wrong with the method or its application.
This leads to a call for a specifically Western initiatory path.
Yes, adapted to modern needs, potentially drawing on ancient Western contacts like the Maya are mentioned, to create a valid ritual system for Western civilization.
Okay, so how does a seeker judge all the occult literature and organizations out there? What standards should they use?
Having accepted the possibility of occult science and initiation, you face a bewildering array. The source advises looking for teachers and groups that embody right principles, possess genuine, clearly articulated knowledge, and demonstrate common sense. Avoid the pitfalls.
And pupils have a right to test a teacher, even if the teacher claims some high inner status.
Absolutely. While some teachers might resist being tested, claiming their inner plane status should be recognized intuitively, pupils have every right to verify through physical plane investigation and common sense evaluation, especially beginners who haven't developed reliable inner discernment yet.
Ethical conduct is paramount.
Teachers should adhere to high ethical standards, similar to doctors or lawyers, avoiding undue influence or abuse of knowledge. However, the occult world lacks formal mechanisms for removing unethical practitioners, so pupil vigilance is crucial.
What about financial integrity? We touched on this.
Teachers with fixed prices for occult work are unlikely to be on the right-hand path. Covering legitimate operational expenses is reasonable, but fees shouldn't be the primary focus. Teachers needing support should be transparent and modest, avoiding profit-making. Be wary of teachers who appear expensive to maintain.
And political involvement, still a no-go.
Spiritual movements should ideally remain politically neutral. Occult organizations have historically been used to cloak ulterior motives. Leaders should avoid creating conflicting loyalties among followers.
Common sense remains key throughout.
Essential, especially regarding claims and promises. Beware of exaggerated claims, appeals to vanity, those thriving on mystery without substance. True knowledge leads to clarity, not more confusion.
Judging by senior students is a good approach. And what about criticisms from former members?
An occult school can often be judged by the character and development of its advanced students. Are they people you'd aspire to be like? Caution is needed with criticisms from dissatisfied former members. Try to discern genuine issues from personal grievances or misunderstandings.
The true way of initiation isn't owned by any one group.
No. While mundane organizations exist as means to an end, the true way is described as a psychic method for spiritual attainment, an inner path not monopolized by any single organization.
What happens if you outgrow a group or teacher?
If an organization's ideals are lower than your own, or your intuition proves more reliable than a teacher, the source suggests inner plane guidance will emerge as you cultivate the necessary inner conditions for advancement. You'll find your own way.
The true purpose of occult training in the genuine schools.
According to the source, schools of the true occult tradition train pupils solely to better serve God, or the highest good, not merely to satisfy curiosity or personal ambition.
And the role of the initiate in the world.
Initiates use their elevated consciousness to bring spiritual ideals into manifestation on the material plane and within racial or collective life. They aim to drive the evolution of human consciousness forward.
How do they do that?
They act as links in a chain, transmitting archetypal ideas from the highest spiritual sources, logoidal consciousness is the term used, down to humanity.
But ideas need to be lived.
Exactly. Archetypal ideas are truly implanted in the group mind when lived out in human life, often requiring sacrifice. And only members of a particular race or group can effectively implant these ideas within their own group mind.
There's an invisible counterpoise of dedicated workers helping us.
Yes, millions involved in materializing these ideals. While psychics might initiate new ideals, everyone can cooperate in their materialization. The Great White Brotherhood, a term for collective higher guidance, is said to provide guidance and protection, working for progress and order, while safeguarding against harmful influences like the left-hand path, drug use, etc.
What is training like in these true occult schools?
Neophytes receive training in occult metaphysics and astral symbol interpretation, understanding their mental significance, not as literal geography. They're taught a simple, abstemious lifestyle, integrated with their racial group mind, distinguished by serenity and courage.
Does it involve challenges?
Yes, training involves enduring trials to refine the soul, forging it through discipline and even danger. The true occultist is described as more akin to a disciplined soldier and a contemplative gardener.
And their ultimate aim.
Their needs are simple, trusting in provision. Their ultimate aim is selfless service to God or the divine.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Today's deep dive into sane occultism has really explored this idea that occultism, at its core, is about understanding altered states of consciousness and their implications.
Right. And navigating the challenges of evidence, distinguishing genuine spiritual seeking from the superficial or even harmful practices.
We've touched upon the importance of personal integrity, critical thinking, and those potential pitfalls: bad authority, financial exploitation, misapplied principles.
Yeah, lots of warnings in there. What's fascinating for me is that perspective that occult doctrines can function almost like a system of algebra for the mind.
Right, enabling it to engage with abstract concepts beyond ordinary thought.
Exactly. And also, the consistent emphasis on verifying psychic experiences and the critical stance on unquestioning belief. Those stand out as surprisingly rational elements within a field often perceived as purely mystical.
So for you, the learner, as you continue to explore various fields of knowledge, the principles we've discussed today seem really applicable across the board, don't they?
Absolutely. The necessity of critical evaluation, distinguishing surface appearances from deeper meaning, the fundamental importance of ethical considerations, these hold true everywhere.
Here's a final thought then. If the ultimate aim of serious occultism, as presented here, is selfless service and advancing humanity's spiritual understanding,
It raises an interesting question. How might a truly sane approach to any field of knowledge, be it science, art, philosophy, whatever, reflect this same underlying principle of contributing to a greater good, beyond just personal gain or curiosity?
that's something to ponder. The world of esoteric thought is undeniably vast and complex. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we definitely encourage you to explore further.
But always, as the source advises, with a discerning mind and a commitment to seeking understanding beyond mere belief.
Consider the ethical implications of any pursuit of knowledge and always question the motivations of those who offer guidance along the way.